Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. We are here with Lindsay Karnick, and we are talking about supporting employee well-being and why therapy benefits matter. Welcome back, Lindsay.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hey, I saw something on your website. I loved it. I literally highlighted it. I was like, ooh, I like this. It says, you're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You simply haven't gotten the support you need to thrive. I love
Yes.
that. Talk to me about that.
Well, one of the things that people experience frequently is a sense of brokenness, and they articulate this in different ways, right? And sometimes that involves a swear word, and sometimes it doesn't. But they will say there's something wrong with me, or I'm not good in some way, or I'm unworthy, or have had so many experiences in my past that this is now the way I am, and that way is incongruent with how I want to be or how I see my life. And I have not met a person yet that I thought was broken or needed to be fixed. The only people that I meet are people who have maladaptive coping patterns. Maladaptive coping patterns are at one point in time adaptive. We don't learn a way of being in the world that doesn't get something done at some point in time. Otherwise, we wouldn't get into those patterns. It had to have worked in some environment, some context, for it to have become sort of entrenched or behavioral. And so one of the most remarkable things that I get to experience with people is helping them sort of sort through the behavior patterns that at one point in time served them really, really well, maybe kept them safe in an emotionally unsafe space, maybe kept them safe in a literally unsafe space, and how, as their context has changed, as the conditions of their lives has changed, those coping patterns no longer make sense. And perhaps they're, in fact, destructive, not just neutral. They're no longer constructive, they're destructive. And people are so brutally hard on themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, they sort of treat these adaptive patterns as characterological traits. This is me. This is something I do, and it's part of who I am. And I love the experience of people discovering that that's not who they are. It's like a heavy jacket that they wore to keep warm, but now that they're living in temperate climates, it's making them sweat and dragging them down. It's simply outdated, and maybe outdated means explicitly not helpful at this point. Yes. And if we can really talk about how helpful those patterns were and understand that at one point in time, they were something we developed because they were good for us or they were the best we could do, but that they no longer serve us and there's something that serves us better, then entirely new worlds open up. And I just think that is so transformatively powerful.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. I think JC has a stat that he just looked up that he wants to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Maladaptive coping patterns such as avoidance, denial, or substance misuse. It can severely impact workplace performance. Employees who rely on these behaviors are 3 times more likely to experience burnout and have a 15% lower productivity rate. That highlights the importance of healthier coping strategies. Back to you.
Lindsay, thoughts on that?
Yes, 100% agree. And certainly some maladaptive behavior patterns are more easily identified as such than others. Yes, we can look at something perhaps like a substance use pattern or substance dependence pattern and say, ooh, that's explicitly not doing you any favors and in fact causing some destruction in your life and creating conditions that you explicitly don't want. Some things are much more subtle than that. Some of those patterns, because we don't recognize them as external to ourselves. We say, oh, this is just how I am, as opposed to a way that I figured out how to be under certain conditions. Those ones can be really hard to spot. JC mentioned avoidance. That's a really good example, right? Because one could say, I'm not being avoidant, I'm just an introvert. Right? I'm not being avoidant, I just don't like that, right? Which could be true. Not all avoidance is necessarily avoidance, but getting curious about how these things impact the life we aspire to have and the ways in which we aspire to show up in any given moment gives us the opportunity to really investigate, is this something that is a value add, neutral, or a value subtract to the life I aspire to live?
Love that. Thank you.
Without judgment, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, without bias or judgment. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah. Hey, JC, do you have any research about like what therapy can do for employees and businesses?
Yeah, actually, I found something through the Harvard Business Review. Employee wellness programs, they yield tangible benefits. Companies with comprehensive wellness programs see a 25% reduction in employee turnover, a 23% decrease in stress-related health costs, and a notable 13% improvement in workplace morale, leading to higher productivity and job satisfaction.
Those are pretty powerful numbers there. Thank you for that. And thanks, everybody, for listening to episode 2 of our 5-part series on supporting employee well-being, why therapy benefits matter. And our next episode, we're going to cover how to integrate therapy services into your organization. As a reminder, if you're watching or listening to this podcast directly through the Aurora Training Advantage website, you can get HRCI and SHRM credits. So check it out. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.